everyone, and welcome to this episode of Between the Grooves, based on my book Between the Grooves, an audio biography. In this episode 2, we're going to look at 1970 to 1972. Absolutely fantastic period for music, and we'll dive straight in with my first choice, which is this beautiful lady here. This is Derek and the Dominos, Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs, released on RCO in November 1970. Nice, lovely gatefold album. Lots of nice artwork on there. And double album. Eric Clapton. So Eric Clapton had been in a number of supergroups, Cream and Blind Faith, and basically this was kind of an attempt at a solo project, but he kind of surrounded himself with a number of his mates and recorded this. He didn't want his name on the album, a bit like, you know, when maybe an author of a book releases. I know that Stephen King would have released books under the name of was it Richard Bachman? I think, again, correct me if I'm wrong. To see, if he could sell records. Stephen King sell books, even if it didn't have his name on it. So they apparently it was a mispronunciation in their first gig. They were actually, I think, supposed to be Derek and the Dynamos, and was mispronounced as Derek and the Dominos, so it kind of stuck, really. Probably the most famous song is Layla, often regarded as Clapton's sort of masterpiece, really, and it's probably his finest musical achievement. I still think it probably is. Born out of his infatuation with Pattie Boyd, who was his mate George Harrison's wife. The album, certainly not one of those albums that one buys on the strength of one song. You're not, only to be disappointed by the rest of the content. We've all done that, right? Maybe you can come up with some in the comments, some examples of where you've bought an album based on the on one song, only to discover that the rest of the album didn't live up to expectation. This is certainly not one of those examples, though it wasn't particularly well received when it first came out. But like a lot of classic albums, it's kind of been reevaluated over the years. Packed full of absolute bangers, great songs on here. The songs are really tight, with loads of layering of guitars. It sounds kind of spontaneous and jammed, and I guess I don't know this, I haven't looked it up, that a lot of it was probably recorded live. It kind of has that kind of feel to it. There's a real energy, real kind of live energy to a lot of the songs, like Keep On Growing and Why Does Love Have to Be So Sad? Both very funky songs. Just check out the bass line in Why Does Love Have to Be So Bad? Absolutely fantastic. Really tight album. Sounds amazing. The artwork was based on a real painting, and I think Clapton bought it, and then it went to Harrison, and I think it eventually found its way into Pattie Boyd's hands, and sold for something shy of 2 million when it went on when it went up for auction. But really great album. Love to listen to that. I was listening to this probably when I was about I'd say sort of 15, 16. I kind of started to get into that kind of blues, the British blues music, which sort of then led me on to sort of the American blues. But I kind of started with the with the Clapton and the Derek and the Dominos and things like that. So the next album, released in 1970. There's a story to this album. And it's not an album that I knew about, and that will become apparent in a moment, until I was much older, probably in my mid 40s. As I say, there's a real reason for that, and there's a real story for that. This is Rodriguez, basically called Stone Cold Fact. Cold Fact, sorry, excuse me. And look, I mean, just look at this dude. What's going on? He's kind of floating in some kind of weird bubble, sitting cross-legged there. Some kind of landscape, yeah? I mean, who is this guy, right? If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend that you check out the documentary Searching for Sugar Man. I think it won a number of awards. Wonderful documentary. The story goes that basically Rodriguez was around about contemporary of kind of like early Bob Dylan, came from Detroit, was in that kind of folk scene. He's kind of like a bit, I suppose, Dylan with a little bit more funk and a little bit more of a soulful voice. Apparently his first gigs, he was so shy he had his back to the audience most of the time. But he released this album, and he did all right, but it didn't do great, you know. And he then released another album, and it did even less, in the States, and and nothing was heard from him again. But this album became a massive multi-million seller in Australia, South Africa, and New Zealand. It was an absolute, everybody had it. You know, if you went to a party in the 70s, they were going to put on Rodriguez, on the turntable at some point. And because he kind of disappeared without a trace, lots of mythology grew up around him, and stories that, he committed suicide live on stage by setting himself on fire, and other sort of macabre and terrible sort of stories. And basically because he kind of disappeared and no one could kind of work out why or what happened. And basically what happened is that the record, let's not get libelous about it, he basically didn't realise that he had sold so well. He wasn't told that. He never received any royalties. And he just went back to his kind of day job, which was, he was a construction worker. He built a family, grew up, had kids, grandkids, all the rest of it. And I won't give too much away, which I already probably have, of the story. But obviously, someone investigated this, and he was kind of plucked back from obscurity. And I had the absolute pleasure of seeing Rodriguez live a couple of times, and it was love. There's a lot of love in the room when I went to see him. And as I said, this was probably in the early 2000s, and this album is really great. It's amazing that it didn't do it better, in sort of in the UK and in North America. Sugar Man is the title track of this. This is the film was based on, and probably the biggest hit on it was a song called I Wonder. It's got a lovely little walking bass line in it. Fantastic. Check it out. Check out Searching for Sugar Man. If you haven't seen it already, I highly recommend checking that out. So the next one, you may be a little surprised at this, and I've got a number of copies of this, and this is the one I've gone for, which came out in 1970, and really it epitomizes my love of a particular genre, the musical, or rather the rock opera. This is my favorite musical of all time. It is, and especially this version. This is this version, beautiful, again, inlaid. There's booklets that you pull out with all the lyrics, and it's a little bit old and fragile, this one, but you can kind of see it's got all the lyrics and the cast. And Jesus in this particular rendition was performed by Ian Gillan of Deep Purple fame. Absolutely love this musical. It dramatises the passion of Jesus, beginning with his entry into Jerusalem and ending with his crucifixion. It was originally banned by the BBC as being sacrilege, but by 1980s, it had basically sold, you know, over 7 million albums. Apparently inspired by a Bob Dylan song, "God on Your Side," which had the lyric, I've got it written here: "You'll have to decide whether Judas Iscariot had God on his side." And I think that's what I love about this album. It's the story, really from the point of view of Judas. It begs the question, you know, without Judas, Jesus wouldn't have been crucified. He wouldn't have become a martyr. You know, how would that story have gone? Really, if you don't like musicals, fair enough. Treat this as a rock opera. 70s version. My favourite version, I would have to say, is probably the soundtrack from the film that came out slightly later. But this is the original concept album, Jesus Christ Superstar, with Ian Gillan of all people as Jesus. Absolutely, you know, give it a listen. Now, I did say in my last podcast in episode 1, a couple of you made some comments that I'd said that it was a particular band that I didn't really get into until I was much older. And it turned out that I'm much older, was about 16. And, oh, really? I think I was Led Zeppelin. And I think what I was saying is I wasn't aware of Led Zeppelin when I was much younger. I only became aware of them later on in life. This is the debut album from a band that I genuinely did not give really much attention to at all, which is massively surprising. I mean, I didn't give it any attention until I was in my mid to late 40s, probably mid 40s. And it's surprising because it's, you know, it's just one of those bands that are considered to be the bedrock of heavy metal and heavy rock. And some would say that they're really the original doom metal band. And I love a bit of doom metal. I love that kind of ponderous sort of tolling of the bell, you know, almost like a funeral march. And the term heavy metal is often regarded as being just that it's not necessarily fast and furious. It's actually heavy. It has that kind of ponderous sort of tolling bong bong kind of feel to it, like, you know, as I say, very dark and mysterious. And this is the debut album by Black Sabbath with the iconic front cover area. Remind me, haven't made a note of it, can't remember off the top of my head. Some of you would tell me where this picture was taken. I do know, I think it's somewhere in near maybe Ipswich, that kind of area possibly. Good friend of mine, Andy, believe lives quite near here. Or am I getting confused with something else? Maybe I am. Okay, let me know. But this is the debut album. I imagine it sounded quite different to a lot of this. I mean, it was on the kind of back of the kind of British blues sort of explosion sort of towards the later period of that, but this would have sounded quite different. It is bluesy, but it's bluesy with that, you know, with that heaviness to it. And, you know, the first time you would have heard Ozzy's incredibly distinctive vocal. You know, as a singer myself and as a songwriter, you know, everybody has a different approach to obviously songwriting, and I tend to write melodies that kind of ride over the top of the music, you know, hopefully in the same key and hopefully in tune, but, you know, not always. But Geezer Butler, who was the bass player, wrote the lyrics. And I think what Ozzy tended to do, if you listen to a lot of Black Sabbath, is he tended to follow that sort of the bass line or the riff, or the main riff from Tony Iommi. And so it's a very distinctive way of sort of putting melodies together in songs. And I don't know, it's not unique, but it's I feel it's kind of very unique to Ozzy. Obviously, Ozzy eventually becoming a reality TV star. If any of you younger viewers are watching, he was actually a singer and he came from Black Sabbath. But I love this album. I actually find it quite a mellow album. I like to kind of listen to it, chill out. It is wonderful. Talking of mellow albums, 1971, third album by this band, a band that came out of a genre of music known as the Canterbury scene. I think it was known, I talk about this in the book, the Canterbury scene was really a collection of musicians that kind of seemed to kind of be in and out of each other's bands, as it were. It's a collection of musicians, really, and few of them actually came anywhere near Canterbury, but it was kind of known as the Canterbury scene. And this band, I think, probably epitomises that genre of music. It's progressive, it's bluesy, it's jazzy as well, and I do think they're criminally underrated. And this is their seminal album. This is In the Land of Grey and Pink by Caravan. Now, I am slightly disappointed that I don't yet have, I think it's probably the original was actually a gatefold. And the reason I mention that is, you probably can't see it here, but the album artwork is incredible. It is this pencil sort of line drawing, and there's so much detail in this. You could just stare at it for hours. And because it was a gatefold, it was quite useful for rolling very large cigarettes in, so you didn't drop any of the contents of your large cigarette. Great album for that, and great album to listen to. It is wonderful, In the Land of Grey and Pink. It's a deceptive album, and I think Mikael Artfeldt from Opeth, lead singer of Opeth, Scandinavian sort of doom metal, death metal band, who I absolutely adore, and we'll come on to them. He spoke about Caravan, and he spoke about this album and said that he actually turned it off the first time he listened to it, because the first song, Golf Girl, was like, it's kind of kitschy and kind of quite poppy, and it kind of feels a bit almost like bubblegum kind of pop, as it were. And he kind of, I'm not listening to that, you know, and switched it off. And then he came back to it, found it in his collection years later, and thought, no, God, I'll keep listening to it. And keep listening to, I mean, I love the song Golf Girl, to be honest. But it really gets into its stride as you listen more to this album, especially the B-side track called 9 Feet Underground, which clocks in at 22 minutes and 43 seconds. It has violins, flutes, mellotrons, saxophones, piccolos, even wobbly fingers on the lips, like that. Okay, I know. Honestly, it works. It's fantastic. It's certainly in one of my top favourite albums of all time. It sounds amazing. And it was actually remixed by Steve Wilson of Porcupine Tree fame. We'll come on to Steve in more detail in later episodes. But still, Steve Wilson is a multi-instrumentalist and producer, and he's remixed lots of classic albums. He's remixed for Jethro Tull and so on. He did apparently do a remix of this, which I haven't listened to. But he is a big fan of this as well. Really influential band, hugely, criminally underrated. I've had the pleasure of seeing them a few times, and they're absolutely superb live. Jazz, folk, blues, rock. It's kind of all in there. Rolling Stone magazine summed it up by saying, "A Middle-earth sunset with the music wavering between medieval folk melodies and jazz-savvy musos." Don't know if that's going to sell it for you, but highly recommended that. In the Land of Grey and Pink by Caravan. Okay, 1971, and I think this is the first live album I'm going to talk about. Again, we're sticking kind of back to the blues, but this time across the water. Probably one of the most seminal blues artists that have ever been produced. Going way back, contemporary of kind of Elvis in the early years and what have you. Started out as a DJ, and then became a musician. If you get a chance to see the film again, The Life of Riley. It's a wonderful sort of docu-film about this guy, and it kind of follows him on one of his last tours. Again, had the privilege of seeing him, I think at the tail end of the 90s I saw him. Really weird. I talk about this in the book. I saw him at Wembley Arena. Now, if any of you have ever seen a gig at Wembley Arena, the place is a barn, right? Never really get a good sound, and it doesn't really feel particularly intimate. Well, when I saw this guy, it was like he was playing in my front room and he was just chatting to me. There were no pyrotechnics, there was no screen, just simple lights, simple staging, and I was mesmerized for 2 hours or so. B.B. King, live in Cook County Jail. It's received sort of many kind of plaudits as one of B.B. King's sort of best offerings. It's actually quite a mellow. Okay, it's blues, so it's going to be, right? But a lot of B.B. King's is quite soulful and kind of funky. But this, I think, maybe because they were performing in a jail, they didn't want to get anybody riled up. So a lot of the music on this is kind of laid back and kind of kind of cool and what have you. And doing the recording had a profound impact on B.B. King, and he established the foundation for the advancement of inmate rehabilitation and recreation. And he kind of supported the rehabilitation of inmates through his entire career. B.B. King, check it out. I mean, thought of as a guitarist, I guess, as a blues guitarist, and an amazing blues guitarist. He's one of those guitarists that there's not a lot of notes, but every note matters, and every note is created and put in the absolutely the right place. Beautiful feel and tonality to his guitar, which he calls Lucille. But I think of him as a singer. He's one of the greatest blues singers ever. Absolutely fantastic. A story that he did When Love Comes to Town with U2, and at the beginning of that song, U2 does a big, massive sort of yell, scream into the mic, and he gives it all he's got. And he tells a story that he kind of did that, and then BB started singing, and it made Bono sound like a little child. BB has such a rich, wonderful voice. So, yeah, I got many BB King albums, and love listening to a bit of BB. Fantastic voice, fantastic tonality, and a wonderful performer. Performed, for all his life, pretty much right up until to the end. Kind of sat in a chair and surrounded by his musicians and telling stories and what have you. Check out Life of Riley, the film. And amazing. So I think I kind of did a bit of an off-the-wall honorary mention in my podcast last time. So I'm going to do one now very quickly. This is reminds me of my father singing. Would get up in the morning. My dad used to sing, around the house and what have you at the top of his voice, mainly to wake us up, I think. Probably this guy's a contemporary of people like Tom Jones. Again, not given the credit I don't think that he deserves. Absolutely lovely voice. And sort of became famous later on in his life because of a video for Comic Relief that Peter Kay did. Tony Chris, look at that guy. Look at that guy. You want to be that guy? Look at this stance, the suit, the hair. Check out their hair. What's going on here? Anyway, avenues and alleyways. Is this the way to Amarillo? All the rest of it. But the song for me is I Did What I Did for Maria. Absolutely wonderful arrangement. Fantastic song. Great singer. Love a bit of Tony. Okay, I've prattled on a little too much this time. So thank you very much for joining me. Subscribe. Comments, anything you want me to cover, any years, any genres or what have you, see what I've got in the collection, and I'll give you some more insight into my album collection next time on the next episode. So thank you very much. Be good, be kind, be truthful, and be free.